Here with me now, as promised, is Senator Adam Schiff of California. Senator, it's good to see you. There's quite a bit going on right now, so I want to talk to you about all of it. I just want to start with the polls because they're pretty consistent, and Trump is underwater on a number of issues. My theory, I just talked through this, is that part of that is his misread of what he called a mandate and just this massive overreach in a number of areas. But how do you see it?
I think that's exactly right. He's claiming that he had this huge mandate, which of course he didn't have. But more than that, they keep saying that he's just following through on his promises. But in fact, he's not. His main promise was he was going to improve the economy. He was going to bring prices down. Of course, everything he's done has been contradictory to that. The tariff wars have just driven inflationary pressures even higher. American families are struggling even more. So really the central promise he has reneged on. And now he's doing all these other things that he never promised during the campaign. In fact, to the degree that they were written about during the campaign in Project 2025, he tried to run away and disavow them. So he doesn't have a mandate to do what he's doing, and I think it's reflected in the already enormous voter dissatisfaction in his first 100 days.
Yeah, I mean, people are just starting to feel the tariffs. They're going to feel them a lot more, which I imagine is going to be worse for him. We'll see what he does. One of the numbers, or some of the sets of numbers that were very interesting to me, were around immigration. And one of the ones that stuck out to me was the approval rating for his handling of the Kilmer-Abrego Garcia case, which is very interesting because a lot of people, I feel like there was some commentary saying we shouldn't talk about it or it shouldn't be front and center. But only 31% of people have approved of his handling of that, which is, I think, very telling. What's interesting about him, and I mentioned this too, though, is that when things like that are clear in the polling, he still goes a step farther. I mean, he arrested a judge, Judge Hannah Duggan, in Milwaukee this week. He had arrested a former judge in New Mexico this week. It feels a little bit like he's still escalating on the immigration front, even when the polling is telling you something different. But what are you seeing about his actions out there? Yeah,
I was struck by that on the polling, too. There were a couple of things that leapt out at me. One was just how poor his numbers were in the handling of that case, because you're right. There was some saying this is a distraction, we shouldn't go there. But this is, to me, the tip of the spear in terms of his violation of the rule of law, basically ignoring a court order to facilitate the return of Kilmer-Abrego Garcia, who was, by their own admission, deported in error. And so the fact that his numbers are so terrible on that means, you know, the public is understanding the case, finds it important, doesn't agree with what the president is doing. And that case, I think, and others, including now we're learning about him deporting, or the administration deporting, a 4-year-old with a stage 4 cancer without giving the family a chance to keep that kid here, U.S. citizen, get the necessary treatment. The other number that really stood out to me, though, was by a 2-to-1 margin, 50-21, people think that he has made their economic circumstances worse rather than better. Those are really damning numbers. But even more broadly on immigration, what concerns me gravely, because now they're using courthouses as a fulcrum for immigration policy. They're using the IRS to enforce immigration policy. They're taking people's appointments with immigration to turn around and deport them, even when people go to get their citizenship, take their citizenship oath. What that's going to mean is fewer undocumented people willing to go to court. And most of the time when undocumented people go to court, they're not the defendant. They're the victim or they're the witness. So they're not going to participate in the justice system. Why file your taxes if they're going to use your taxes against you to deport you? So it's going to mean a lot of people aren't going to be paying their taxes that would normally be paying taxes. People aren't going to show up for their immigration appointments because they'll fear they're going to be used to just grab them instead of whatever process they're in. So it's going to mean millions of people going deeper into the shadows, which is not in the interest of law enforcement or tax collection or society. So in the bigger picture, I think it's a real mistake.
I've never thought about it exactly that way. It's interesting how it deters people from participating in aspects of the system, paying taxes, and again, going to courts when they need to be defended themselves. The arrest of the judge in Wisconsin, again, not isolated, felt jarring. I know that we should be jarred by too many things these days. Do you think? I mean, you've done the studying of Donald Trump for a long time. Is that to scare people, to deter judges from doing what their job is? What do you think the motivation is behind that?
I think it is.
Yeah.
In a normal, rational world, you would have immigration authorities work with a courthouse and decide, okay, how do we work together, or how do we at least not interfere with what each other are doing? You wouldn't have the kind of confrontation and arrest that we saw. But the administration relishes this. They relish the opportunity to go after judges. They relish the opportunity to try to intimidate and shock people. They talk, just gleefully about impeaching judges they disagree with. So it is part of a broader assault on the rule of law, a broader effort to intimidate. They're intimidating the universities. They're intimidating the law firms. They're intimidating corporations, forcing them to come hat in hand begging for exemptions from tariffs. And now they're trying to intimidate the judiciary as well. No
question. I want to ask you, I mean, you were the lead impeachment manager, of course, as we all know, for Trump's first impeachment trial. We all followed it very closely. You were on the January 6th committee. I know this is maybe not your favorite topic, but one of your colleagues, Senator John Ossoff, said at a town hall that Donald Trump should be impeached. Basically,
joining me now is Congressman Robert Garcia of California, a member of the House Oversight and Homeland Security Committees. Congressman, as always, thank you very much for coming to the Saturday show. So tell me, what did you learn from your visit to El Salvador?
Well, a couple of things. I think the most important thing, and we're, of course, there because Donald Trump is defying a 9-0 unanimous Supreme Court decision to bring back Garcia back to the United States and lower courts, of course. We went there to inquire, was the facilitation process, had that begun as ordered by the court? Could we see Kilmer Garcia? And what we learned directly from the embassy and the U.S. ambassador is that they have not been directed in any way to begin the facilitation or return of Roberto Garcia back to the U.S. And so even though there's a court order, the embassy on the ground is actually not doing any of that. They denied us a chance to see him. Only Republicans are now being allowed to have official codels to go to the prisons in El Salvador. They're denying Democrats from doing so. We went anyway. And of course, we're also inquiring about other people there that had no due process, like Andre Romero and others that deserve a chance to be in front of a judge.
And I'm going to ask you about Andre Hernandez Romero in a second. Let me read you something that President Trump said in his interview with Time magazine about whether Abrego Garcia deserves his day in court. Listen to this. That's not my determination. It's something that, frankly, bringing him back and retrying him wouldn't bother me, but I leave that up to my lawyer. You could bring him back and retry him, but I leave that decision to the lawyers. At this moment, they just don't want to do that. They say we're in total compliance with the Supreme Court. One, Congressman, that last line is a lie. But two, what the president says here, I think, is Exhibit A, and what you and your fellow Democrats have been arguing from moment one, which is this is a constitutional crisis. The president of the United States is the chief constitutional officer of this country, and he, right here in this quote, is saying there's nothing he can do.
I mean, completely shameful and dangerous. I mean, we're in a moment right now where the president is defying the judicial branch of government. We have a separation of powers in this country. You don't get to pick and choose what parts of the Constitution you actually want to follow. This is the president of the United States. And if the Supreme Court is ordering that someone gets returned back to our country, he has to follow those orders and that ruling. And why this case is so important is that we cannot allow Donald Trump to cross this line. A president has not defied the Supreme Court in this way, and we cannot allow it to happen at this moment, which is why every single American should be very concerned that due process is under attack, something that is, of course, we know vital to the Constitution and something that's given to everyone in this country, whether they're a citizen or a non-citizen. Everyone has a right to due process.
Let me get your view on the arrest of Judge Duggan there in Milwaukee yesterday. How does that fit in with your overall concerns?
Well, this is very concerning. You're arresting now judges. You are cutting deals with big law firms to not sue the federal government or the administration or to do pro bono work for Donald Trump. You are eliminating due process for people in this country, for now non-citizens and U.S. citizens, as we have learned. So the full-on attack of the judiciary system in this country has begun. It's a constitutional crisis. We should be taking it as serious as it is. And we need to be talking about this every single day and reminding people that Donald Trump is destroying everything we know about the separation of powers.
And let's talk about Andre Hernandez Romero, makeup artist and Venezuelan asylum seeker who was deported to El Salvador. They accused him of gang affiliations based on his tattoos. Were you able to, have you heard anything about him at all?
This is where we got some steps forward, but there's still not enough information out there. Here's the reality. This is someone that had an appointment. The United States government gave Andre an appointment to seek asylum at the border. He came to his appointment that we provided him. Then during that appointment, he gets scooped up, essentially kidnapped by ICE and Homeland Security, sent to a country he knows nothing about, to a foreign prison that we know is already incredibly dangerous. He's someone that's described as delicate, as sweet, as kind. He is obviously LGBTQ. He was fleeing because he was gay from Venezuela. The ambassador told me directly that they're going to do a welfare check on Andrew and try to get information. It was the first time that
what we have here again is the judge really rousing people. Again, some people become heroes just by standing for what they believe in, yes, but also just being there at the right place at the right time. And what this whole affair is showcasing is that Donald Trump is a threat to due process and to law and order. And we see this by how he's treating everybody. It really is an interesting occurrence because often these cases, and it's still this way, I don't want to downplay it. Often the people most affected by harsh right-wing policy are the poor and the marginalized. And we've seen that. American citizens getting deported. People who are here officially getting deported to El Salvador. American citizens being brutalized by police if they're black or indigenous or what have you. But Donald is creating this unity because he's made it clear no one is safe. He went after a white female judge. He didn't go after a young, poor black person from, downtown New York or downtown Detroit or Chicago. I mean, they are going after those people, but it's an illustration of how he's helping to build the narrative that no one is safe. And once that narrative becomes solidified, people are more roused. Because, guys, it's going to sound awful, but we remember the famous poem, "First they came for X, but I was not X, so I didn't care. First they came for the communists. First they came for the socialists. First they came for the trade unionists. First they came, for the Jews or what have you. And I was none of those groups. And all of those groups were by some degree outside the mainstream. The poem never had, and then they came for the literal judges. And I mean, eventually they, but they came for the judges. That snaps people into action. And Donald made a huge error.